My first and most profound experience with the power of setting was during my childhood. I'd sit around for hours dreaming about two cities at war in the desert. I could go on about the details for some time, but suffice to say that what had begun as a passing fancy in Pueblo construction and violence eventually grew into an expansive World War II type conflict, with metal-infused clay and plants which grew gunpowder, as well as fibers for clothing and such. I can't remember exactly when I put myself into this world. I certainly did end up in it eventually, but my own hero's spotlight was secondary to the joy of answering my own questions about the world, making what I wanted and then blending it into my idea of how everything ought to work. I visited this world for years, and still stop by from time to time, enjoying the company of an old friend, which has lost his novelty, but not his charm. As I got older, I threw myself into books, always fantasy. I would again spend hours alone, this time with the world and characters already constructed, and so I would place myself in, always careful not to be too important, not to break the rules of the world. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if I was a lonely kid. I was 12 when The Force Awakens came out. I had seen Star Wars before, of course. I grew up with the Clone Wars, like the rest of my generation. But going out to see that movie stirred a Star Wars fervor in me, which wouldn't let up for years. Of course, as the rest of that trilogy came out, I turned into a bit of a cynic. The damage was done. I can't say I was the most thorough Star Wars fan. There were plenty of books I didn't read, and I didn't quite make it through Rebels. But it occupied an undeniable space in my mind. I spent less time inside of Star Wars, and more time considering it. By which I mean, I learned its rules because I enjoyed knowing it. I even wrote a research paper about lightsaber fighting styles. The epic battles and raw scale are a big part of what I enjoy about George Lucas's space western. But all great things are rendered so by contrast. Without the little scenes in between the action, bustling locals and alien vistas, kind strangers and quiet moments, it's just a battle. But when a setting takes the time to make everyone a person, it makes the scale more meaningful. I've done more of that recently. Smaller stories, the kind which make up a setting and countable, unseen numbers. It is this enjoyment of the little guy, combined with a growing appreciation for gratuitous violence, which brought me to Warhammer. It naturally avoids overly emphasizing its main storyline because of its original purpose. Warhammer started as a tabletop game. The world was constructed, initially at least, as a narrative justification to play matches against your friend. The whole point was creating a space to tell your own story, which could be meaningful without being impactful. Because I listened to just one Warhammer lore podcast, I've now listened to like 20 Warhammer audiobooks and played hundreds of hours of video games in the setting. It's not brilliant storytelling or character crafting which has latched it onto my brain. It's the deep, vaguely mysterious, but well-explained context in which those stories are told. If I want to dive in deeper, there's more for me to find. In my brain, it's a beautiful thing. A matrix of systems and stories and conflicts, all balanced atop each other, trying to make sense. Just considering it, allowing my mind to absorb its pieces and appreciate its ambiance, brings me pleasure. On consideration, this is why I love fantasy and highly contrived settings. I love cool things. I want to think about and interact with cool things. I'm constrained by a brain which demands explanations and understanding. This was the paradigm which drove my little world all those years ago, which drove my dive into Star Wars, and which drives my nerdy shit today.